Hey guys, I was going to talk a little about financial related math. And actually, like I mentioned, I'm a trained economist. That's my specialty. And I'm going to talk a little about leasing and the idea of depreciation and also making interest payments. Now, it doesn't apply as much today because interest rates are quite high relative to where they've been for the last 20 years, right? I mean, over the last 40 years, interest rates have gone from the Paul Volcker saving the dollar and being almost 20% to they were basically 0% 2 years ago, right? And now, given the reckless spending and causing inflation, now the Fed wants to hike rates, but how long can they do it for? So anyways, the point is, and I'll just give an example. Okay, so if you listen to Dave Ramsey, a lot of people like that, they say you should never lease a car. I've always agreed with that. And the reason is a lease is just a rental, right? So you're actually renting the car. And a car is not something that you want to, say, invest in, right? It's a depreciating asset. Well, except today it's not, which is the crazy thing because of the shortage of new cars and the difficulty of getting one. Used cars actually are more expensive than new cars in some cases. So if you can imagine buying a used jacket and paying more than the brand new one, it's pretty crazy, right? And so this is a terrible time to lease a car because the lease is you are paying for the first 3 years of depreciation. And today, given that first year is really high because there's a markup of the car. So just to give you an example, I was at a Toyota dealership getting my car serviced. I got it last July, so a year ago, and I paid less than, there was a used Toyota. I have an all-wheel drive, leather seats, not like super fancy, but I'm just saying. So it's a minivan, Sienna, and there was a used one that was 1 or 2 years, I think it was a year old, and it had cloth seats, two-wheel drive, a year old, going for more than I paid for my leather all-wheel drive with like the extended warranty and prepaid service and all that stuff, right? So that's how crazy it is. And so I asked him, I had to pay $3,000 over MSRP, so I had to pay a markup of $3,000, and I had to wait about a month to get the car. Now you might have to wait a year, and you're going to pay like $7,000 over. Okay, so it's gotten much worse. But so going back to 3 years ago, before lockdowns and supply chain issues it created, then we could say that leasing a car, my wife leased a car, and it can be a disaster. So she actually purchased a new one, ended up somebody hit it, so now it's depreciated significantly. It was like way underwater. And so then I'm like, okay, leasing a car actually not a bad idea, because typically if you lease a car and you don't go over mileage, they've estimated that the value of the car when you're done leasing is equal to what you'll turn it in for. So you don't typically owe anything. If you turn it in early, you might owe something, unless you like turn it around and get a new one at the same dealership, in which case they usually don't care. So I did that with a Mazda. I went from the CX-3, which I absolutely love that car, but I went to the 5 because we had a kid, and CX-3s for like no kids, right? There's no room in the back seat. There's no room in the back. It's a very small car. It's a sub-compact SUV. Loved it. Those seats were the most comfortable seats I've ever sat in a car. Anyways, it's a very cheap car too, relatively. So looking for a car, totally recommend it. And then the 5 just has more room, and then we went minivan. But the point is, I leased, and I was always against leasing, but what the lease does is you have a set mileage per year, and as long as you don't exceed it by the end, you know that you're very unlikely to owe money unless something happens. Now, actually, I was able to sell the right to my lease for $2,000, right? Because they need used cars so badly, they were happy to buy that car from me. So what the lease does is, though, over the first 3 years, the car depreciates. Cars depreciate non-linearly, right? a car is not going to lose $20,000 per year for some amount of years. Because if that were true, after a period of time, the car would be worth no money, and eventually it would be worth negative money, which makes no sense, right? Cars are never worth no money. There's something about the car, whether it be the tires or the wheels or something in the car that has some kind of value. It's even got scrap value, right? If you could get it towed to the junkyard, they'll give you maybe $100 or something, even an old car. So they depreciate non-linear, so they're going to go like this, right? So about 20% per year for the first 3 years, okay, maybe for its lifetime. And now, if you're an accountant and you're in a business, you want to do a linear depreciation. That's just a tax thing, right? So, but they depreciate non-linearly, and so the first 3 years you're going to pay about 20% loss, and that means your lease price is going to reflect that plus interest plus, Now if you buy the car, it's really no different. You're buying a car that's depreciating at the same rate, and so the first years you are putting money up front, or maybe you're buying it over time, right? Making payments. Doesn't matter. You're paying for that depreciation either way. And so when you lease a car, I have changed a little bit because there are factors that make leasing a car advantageous. So if you like a new car, right? You don't want a car that somebody else has been in, you get a new car. Leasing a car allows you usually it's a significantly lower payment than a lease. Nowadays it's not. Like for $1,000 a month purchase payment might be $800 or $900 leasing, and then it's foolish to lease, right? Because you're paying that $7,000 markup up front for the first 3 years. You divide it over 3 years rather than like 5 or 6 years, and then you own the car and all that. So it's not a bad idea in some cases to lease. Now, the specific option I want to talk about here is putting money down. Now, I wanted to put no money down, as minimum as possible. So for my leases, I didn't put any money down. And the reason, you're paying like 1, maybe 2% interest, right? And so let's say you have $10,000, you could put that $10,000 down up front, but then there's a bit of a risk. What if I total the car? Am I going to get my money back? Maybe, right? So maybe you do, but it might take time, right? But second, and this is really the most important thing, something called opportunity cost. That means every action taken has an opportunity cost. That is, you're giving up something when you do it. In the case of, say, they want you to put, usually the commercials say $2,500 down or whatever. Now, let's say my monthly payment is $500 a month, okay? So I had a CX-5, I was paying $500, which is a lot for a lease, actually, for a car that's not super expensive. But anyways, it was $500 a month, and I could have put $2,500 down, and that would have taken my monthly lease payment down to like maybe $400. I don't actually know the numbers, but let's just say $400. So I could have saved $100 a month by putting $2,500 down. That's 25 monthly payments, right? 2 years worth. So probably would have been less than that saved. But that $2,500 also would be the equivalent of 5 monthly payments, right? So there is something to be said about having security, if you will, of having a little bit of money in the bank, right? So let's say you lose your job. That $2,500 would have been a big deal if I lose my job. I don't have any income. I have $2,500 there. I would rather have that than be paying 2% on that, or even 1 to 2% interest on that $2,500 saving, that is. So, again, like a $500 monthly payment, my interest rate of 1% is pretty insignificant, right? It's $5, $10 a month maybe and that's annually, by the way, so it's like $1 a month. So I'm only saving a very tiny amount because interest rate is so low. So the $2,500 would reduce my monthly payments, my depreciation payments, by a very small amount, 1 or 2%, versus the potential backup, the rainy day fund of the $2,500 that I would have sitting in the bank. So if you're looking at putting money down versus a higher monthly payment, don't don't think about, oh, I could save a few dollars. Like really do the calculations about the interest rate and how much am I actually saving, right? So I don't have anything in front of me that I've actually done, but maybe I'll do some quick calculations and try to see how much exactly would, if I paid $2,500 a month and I got my monthly payments from 500 down to 100. And again, this is 2% annualized, right? So 2% is about 0.2% per month, which is really insignificant, right? Maybe a couple bucks. And to me, it was much more worthwhile having money sitting there in, just think about under the bed, right? Money out the mattress, Underwood. So money in the mattress sitting there, and I can make 5 monthly payments on my car versus having put that money up front and giving it to them and then not having any money sitting there, so that if I do lose my job, I have no monthly payments. My monthly payment is lower, but I have nothing to pay with, right? So it's just much better, I think, to, given interest rates were low, to keep that money and have some security, a bit of a security blanket, if you will, sitting there. And also, that's again pointing out that leasing is not necessarily a bad idea. What a lease does, again, is it gives you a lower monthly, typically under normal conditions, a significant lower monthly payment, which allows you to get into a car that you otherwise might not be able to. And that's Dave Ramsey says that's one of the problems, is maybe you can't afford the car and you're out there driving around a car you can't afford, and so you're just renting it. And that's true. Yeah. Okay. So there is definitely some truth to that. Maybe you should, most people should probably get a used car. Right now, again, you probably can't get a hold of either. so it's crazy times, and it's going to get crazier, but that's my opinion. So anyways, this is an intro to the financial elements. Now, again, with the financial elements here, let me just talk quickly. I've got the computer in front of me. So we've done some of the argument stuff, and now we're going to get into paying down a loan. Like, say you do buy a car, that $54,000 year-old 2-wheel drive cloth seat car, minivan, right? Sienna. What is the monthly payment on that? So you have to figure that, you have to calculate in the interest rate. How long is it going to take you? So typically there were like 5-year payments, 60 month, right? Before that it was like 36 monthly payments. Then that's 3 years. They draw it out to 48, and then 60 is 5 years. They're actually drawing car payments because cars are getting so expensive. And to lower that monthly payment, you draw out the loan for a longer period of time. Could be 72 months, right? 6 years, 84 months, maybe 7 years, right? Which is a long time to be paying off a car that's losing value every year. And so ideally you want to pay things off earlier, but you have to really think about that interest rate and the monthly payment and what can you afford and things like that, right? So we do have these formulas here that allow you to see what is going to be my monthly payment. Now, just moving away from the cars for a moment to a house, right? So a house, you don't want your monthly payment for the home to be more than maybe 25, maybe 30, so 1/3 of your gross pay, right? Now, a monthly payment, you get to write off the interest, and most of your monthly payment is going to be interest. So it's not like saying, hey, I make $3,000 a month, say, and my monthly payment for whatever housing should be $1,000, and I'm only gonna be left with $2,000 minus taxes. Well, that $1,000 is actually gonna reduce your taxes a little bit. So that's why a lot of people like to hold on to their mortgage, whereas traditionally you had mortgage burning parties. This is another thing that, consider. A house is different than a car, of course, but my view is pay off your house if you can, because that's where you live, and it's an asset. It is an asset typically that increases in value. Right now, I think houses will decrease in value. I think people that just bought a house are going to be sad. But as interest rates go up, that's what happens. So anyways, we'll continue on with more of this. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video, and that you liked my donkeys, Santorini donkeys. There's the Greek islands. You have Mykonos, famous for windmills. Santorini, Rhodes, famous for the Colossus, which there's no actual evidence that it ever existed. But then Santorini is famous for donkeys, which are, in 07 when I got a job in England and I was able to go down to Greece, and I did a Greek island hopping tour, and we go to Santorini and you climb the volcano, which is a small mound in the middle of the island, and it's active and it's growing, but there's like little places you can smell the sulfur and feel the heat. Pretty cool. And then you go over to the hot spring, which is relatively warm water in this little pool part of the Mediterranean. It's not really warm, but you got to take off your gold because there's a high sulfur content that will destroy your jewelry, so they make you take it all off. But then they bus you up to the top of the island, go all the way across, and then you have the option of taking the tram, the gondola, down to the bottom, or ride the donkeys. And I was like, this isn't even a question. Well, why would I ride a gondola? It's dumb, right? So, like, I've been to a ski resort. I'm not gonna ride a gondola on Santorini. I'm riding the donkey. So the girl in front of me dropped her sunglasses, and yeah, you don't get off the donkey and pick them up. So, but then I did. I thought Balaam, right? Because the donkey was getting pretty close to the wall, and that made me think of Balaam in the Old Testament, like crushing your foot against the wall, right? So, anyways, enjoy, and hope you guys have a nice week, Tuesday, and such.